Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit malicious compliance stories. In today's Ripestories video, imagine surviving 4 years under the worst, most abusive restaurant manager on the planet and finally hitting your breaking point and quitting, only for him to then literally call the cops on you out of pure spite. However, his revenge backfired in the most spectacular way possible. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is from r/maliciouscompliance and is titled, "My boss called the cops on me for quitting my job, so I got him fired from his job. For a little over 4 years, I worked at a barbecue and steak place. It was not one of those big chains you see off the highway. The guy who owned it had 2 restaurants total, this one and another one a couple towns over, and he split his time between them. Most of the time, he was at the other location because it was newer and he was still getting it on its feet. That meant our place was basically run day to day by the general manager. I started there washing dishes and then moved up the line, and then I was closing the kitchen, and then I was pretty much running the back of house on most shifts. I trained new cooks, I did the food orders when the produce guy came, and I built the prep lists, and I just knew where everything was and how everything worked, and honestly, I loved the actual job. Cooking is the one thing I'm good at, and the regulars knew me, and it felt like a real place to be. The problem was the general manager. I'm gonna try to keep my description of him fair, but it's hard because the guy was a nightmare. He was the kind of manager who never lifted a finger but somehow took credit for everything. If a busy Friday went well, he told the owner that he had handled the rush. If it went badly, it was always somebody else's fault, usually mine or one of the servers. He would come strolling in around lunch, sit in the back office watching videos on his phone and come out to yell at people for 20 minutes and then leave before the dinner rush even hit. We would be drowning and he would be just gone. He loved to remind everyone that he was in charge. His favorite line, and I swear I heard this like 1,000 times, was, "I'm the one the owner trusts to run this place, so as far as you're concerned, I'm the owner." He said it to servers, he said it to cooks, he said it to a 16-year-old hostess who asked if she could leave 10 minutes early for a school thing. The owner himself was actually a decent guy, stressed, stretched too thin but decent. The thing was, he believed everything the general manager told him because the general manager was the only filter between the owner and the rest of us. When the owner called, the manager answered. When the owner stopped by, the manager put on this whole performance, suddenly working the floor, suddenly best friends with everybody. "Oh, we're a family here." The second the owner's truck left the lot back to the office and the phone, so the owner had no real idea what was going on, and what was going on was bad. Let me just give you the highlights. We were chronically understaffed because the manager refused to hire enough people, and I eventually figured out why, but I'll get to that. We would routinely have one cook, me, trying to do the work of 3 on a Saturday night. Servers quit just constantly because he treated them like garbage and because of the tip situation, which I will also get to. The ones who stayed were stretched so thin that service suffered, customers complained, and then the manager would scream at us for the complaints he caused. The screaming was a daily thing. He'd find one little mistake and just unload, usually right in front of customers or new hires, because humiliating people was the only management tool that he had. He once made a teenage dishwasher cry over a tray of glasses that were not perfectly dry, and the kid quit that night and never came back. And then there was the money stuff, which is where this whole story really turns. 2 things. First, whenever there was a walkout, meaning a customer left without paying, the manager made the server cover it out of their own pocket. Same with broken dishes. Drop a plate, that's $8 out of your tips. A table dines and dashes on a $90 tab. The server who had that table eats the $90. This is illegal where I live. I mean, flat out illegal, but none of the servers knew that, and the manager was sure not gonna tell them. He just collected the cash and said it was policy. And second, this took me a long time to piece together, he was skimming. We did a fair amount of catering and big party bookings, and people would put down deposits in cash sometimes, especially the older regulars who did not like cards, and I started noticing that some of those deposits never seemed to show up anywhere. I only knew because I was the one prepping for those parties, so I knew a party was booked and I knew the customer mentioned putting money down, but the manager handled all the cash and the books. I'm not an accountant, I didn't have a full picture at the time, I just had a weird feeling and a habit because of the way he treated everyone of quietly keeping notes. I kept copies of prep sheets, I kept a little log on my phone of which parties came in, I took photos of the deposit envelopes when customers handed them over at the counter because I would be the one who happened to be up front. I was not planning anything per se, I just did not trust the guy as far as I could throw him, and something in my gut told me to keep track of this. Anytime anybody had a complaint, the manager had a standard response. He would sneer and go, "You got a problem with how I run things? Put it in writing and send it to the owner. Go right ahead. Be my guest. See how far that gets you." Cue malicious compliance. He said this like it was a dare because he was so sure the owner would always take his side. He said it to me directly more than once. The last time was maybe a month before everything blew up. I had asked him calmly if we could please hire even one more cook because we were getting buried and the food quality was slipping. He leaned back in the office chair and said, "If you think you can run this place better, write the owner a nice little letter about it, put it all in writing, otherwise shut up and cook." Cool, noted. So now to the night it all came apart. It was a Saturday and it was the kind of Saturday that breaks people. We had a big party booked, plus a packed dining room, plus to-go orders stacking up, and I was the only cook, the only one. We were supposed to have at least 2 more, but one had quit that week. The manager screamed at him over a no-call situation that was not even the kid's fault, and the other had been cut from the schedule because the manager wanted to save on labor. Tickets were hanging off the rail like a curtain. I was sweating through my shirt, burning my arms on the grill, trying to keep my head above water. And by the way, guys, let me know in the comments, have you ever worked in such a toxic work environment with such an awful manager? Please feel free to share your stories in the comments, and if you enjoy these kinds of stories about work environments and terrible bosses, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe post a comment if you want to support me. Thank you so much for the support. And I gotta be honest with you guys, recently a lot of AI channels have been remonetized and they are absolutely flooding the YouTube algorithm once again, so it's getting harder once again for real voice readers to essentially drown out the noise. Thank you so much for the support. Anyway, of course, since the owner had texted that he might swing by, the manager was actually out of the office and on the floor doing his little performance. He came back to the line and instead of helping, instead of even bumping a little plate, he started in on me. In front of the servers, in front of the window where customers could see. "What is taking so long? People are waiting. You're moving like you're half asleep. I've got a dining room full of angry people and one lazy cook back here taking his sweet time." I didn't even look up, I just said, "Well, then get on the station and help me, or hire the cooks I've been asking for." That set him off. He got right up next to me and went, "Don't tell me how to run my restaurant, you're replaceable. I can find 10 guys to flip burgers for what I pay you. You think you're special? Pick up the pace or get out." And something in me just went quiet. You know that feeling. I was not even angry anymore, I was just done. 4 years of this, I looked at the wall of tickets, looked at this guy who had never once helped me on a busy night, and I made a decision. I untied my apron, I set my tongs down on the cutting board, I turned off the burner in front of me, nice and calm. He blinked. "What are you doing?" "I'm getting out," I said, "like you told me." "You cannot leave, we're in the middle of a rush." "You've got it handled though, right? You're the one the owner trusts to run this place, so just run it." I walked to the back, grabbed my stuff out of my locker, clocked out and headed for the door. The servers were staring at me like I'd grown a second head or something. One of them, a girl who'd been there almost as long as me, mouthed, "Are you serious?" And I just nodded and kept walking. The manager followed me out into the parking lot, screaming the whole way. "You walk out of that door, you're never working in this town again. You are abandoning your job, I'll make sure nobody hires you." All of that stuff, I got in my car and drove home, and I'm not gonna lie, I felt incredible, lighter than I'd felt in years. I figured that was the end of it. I had quit, dramatically sure, but people quit jobs. But nope. About 2 hours later, while I was sitting on my couch finally relaxing, there was a knock on my door. I opened it and there were 2 police officers standing on my porch, and my stomach dropped. I thought somebody was hurt, and instead one of them asked me my name and then asked if I'd been employed at the restaurant earlier that day. Turns out my manager had called the cops on me, and he told them 2 things. One, that I had abandoned my post in a way, and I quote what the officer relayed, endangered the business, which is not a crime, that's just quitting. And 2, the real reason he called, he claimed that I'd taken money from the register on my way out. I just stood there with my mouth open. The officer was actually pretty chill about it. I think he could tell from my face, and I said, "I didn't touch the register. I've never had access to the register. I just work in the kitchen. You can check the cameras. There's a camera right over the register and one over the kitchen door. I walked out the back to my locker and out the side door, nowhere even near the front register." The police officer nodded and wrote something down. The other officer asked a couple questions, and that was basically it. They told me it sounded like a workplace dispute, not a criminal matter, and that they would follow up. They were polite, they left, and I sat back down, and my hands were shaking. But not from fear anymore, I was furious. This guy created a hellhole of a workplace, drove everyone out, screamed at me until I quit, and then called the police and accused me of stealing to cover his own butt. And by the way, guys, if you would be in OP's situation, how would you retaliate? How would you get revenge on this terrible boss? And honestly, he really deserves some kind of revenge. He tried to make me a criminal because I wouldn't keep taking his abuse, and that is when the calm came back. The same quiet feeling from the kitchen, and I thought about that thing he always said, put it in writing, send it to the owner, be my guest. Okay, you want it in writing, you will get it in writing. I spent that whole night and most of the next day building what I can only describe as a case file, and once I laid it all out, even I was shocked by how much there was. I had photos of cash deposit envelopes that customers had handed over the counter for catering and party bookings, with dates because I'd been the one prepping those events, and I matched those against my prep logs, which I had because I built the prep list for every party. There were several parties where I had clear evidence cash came in, and based on what my coworker had told me about the books, no record of it ever being logged. I could not prove the final dollar amount because I wasn't the bookkeeper, but I could absolutely show the owner exactly which dates to go pull and check, which is all you really need to do to catch someone. I had screenshots of text messages where the manager told servers and cooks to clock out and then keep working to save labor hours. Multiple people, multiple dates. That is what you call wage theft, plain as day. I even had text where he told the server that she owed him $40 for a walkout and that he would take it out of her tips, which is the illegal deduction thing. I had a couple of those. I had a running list with dates of how many days we'd been understaffed and the complaints that resulted because I'd kept track for myself out of pure frustration. This was the part the owner would care about most because the manager had been telling him everything was fine and well staffed and that the bad reviews were the staff's fault. I organized all of it into one long, clear, calm email, led with the part about him calling the police on me and falsely accusing me of theft because that is a serious thing to do on an employee, and I knew it would get the owner's attention right away. Then I laid out the rest of it. Now here's the malicious compliance cherry on top. I didn't have the owner's personal email, but the manager in his arrogance had once forwarded me something from the owner so I could see how important the catering account was, and the owner's direct email was right there in the thread. I had saved it so I had exactly what I needed because of the manager's own laziness, and I sent the whole thing straight to the owner, and I added one line at the end. I wrote, "For 4 years your manager told all of us that if we had a problem we should put it in writing and take it straight to you, so I'm finally taking him up on it." Then I went to bed and slept like a rock for the second night in a row. The owner called me at like 7:30 the next morning. I almost didn't pick up because I didn't recognize the number, but I'm glad I did. The guy sounded shaken. He had clearly been up most of the night reading and rereading what I sent to him. The first thing he said was not even about the money. He said, "He called the cops on you? He told them you stole from me?" I said yeah, and that 2 officers showed up at my house over it. There was this long pause and then he said very quietly, "I never authorized that. I never would. I'm so sorry." He told me he had no idea that any of this was happening. He said the catering deposits especially had him sick to his stomach because a few of the regular customers who booked parties were people he had known for years, and he was the one who assured them that their deposits were safe. He kept saying, he told me we were fully staffed, he told me the bad reviews were because the kitchen was slow, and he told me that you were the problem actually. That last part stung, but I was not even surprised. He asked me if I'd be willing to come in and walk him through everything in person with the actual photos on my phone, and I said sure. I went in the next day on a closed Monday, just me and the owner in the dining room, and I showed him every photo, every text, every prep sheet, and he had a notepad and he was writing down dates the whole time. At one point, he pulled up the booking calendar and the deposit records on a laptop and started cross-checking against my photos right there in front of me, and I watched his face change as he found the gaps. One party, a 50th anniversary thing, the customer had clearly handed over a cash deposit, I had the photo, I remembered the lady, she was lovely, and there was nothing logged for it. Nothing, multiple times. He sat back, rubbed his face and said, "I trusted him completely. That is on me. I got comfortable and I trusted him and I stopped checking." He didn't drag the firing out. He told me he was bringing in his accountant to do a full review of both the cash handling and the payroll records, and that based on what I'd already shown him, the manager was done regardless of what the deeper review found, and he said the wage theft alone, having people work off the clock, was enough on its own, never mind the rest. I'm gonna keep the legal stuff short because honestly I don't know all the details and I wasn't involved in most of it, but the owner fired him that week. The owner reported the wage theft situation to the proper labor authorities himself, partly I think because he wanted to protect himself and partly because he was genuinely angry on behalf of his staff. He made the servers who had walkouts and breakages taken out of their pay whole again, every one of them, going back as far as he could figure out. The cash skimming, from what I understand, became its own separate problem for the former manager, and let's just say that falsely accusing someone of theft is a real bad look when you're the one who turns out to have been stealing the whole time. I don't know exactly how that part ended and I'm not gonna pretend I do. I just know it was not good for him. Here's how it ended for me, because I know you will ask. The owner offered me the manager's job, the actual general manager's position. I told him honestly that I appreciated it, but I wasn't sure I wanted to step into that role at the place where I just gone through all of that, and he understood. What we landed on instead was me coming back as kitchen manager with a real raise, real authority over the kitchen, and a promise of actual staffing, and he hired a new general manager who, so far, is a normal human being who helps on the line during a rush like it's the most obvious thing in the world, because it is. And yeah guys, honestly, I cannot fathom the absolute audacity of a guy who sits in an office watching his phone all day, presumably, to scream at the only person cooking food is wild. He really thought that he was the main character of a restaurant he didn't even own, and I bet he still tells people at bars that he was a great manager and the staff just couldn't handle the pressure. Also, if you ask me, calling the cops on a cook for quitting is just the most unhinged crazy power trip I've ever heard of. What did he think was gonna happen? That the cops were gonna force you at gunpoint to finish the Saturday dinner rush? That is not how the real world works. And the first comment from Reddit said, "I don't care how toxic the manager was. You walked out in the middle of a Saturday dinner rush as the only cook. You didn't stick it to the manager. You completely screwed over the servers who were relying on those tips to pay their rent. And you left the dishwashers and hostesses to deal with the fallout of a packed dining room." The manager was sitting in the back watching videos, so he was not the one getting yelled at by hungry customers. Two wrongs don't make a right. You should have finished your shift and quit on a Monday. I'm not sure if I agree with that. Either way, another comment from Reddit basically responded to the first comment and said, "People in the comments saying you are an a-hole for walking out mid-rush have clearly never worked in a toxic BOH environment when a manager tells you to pick up the pace or get out, and you are literally the only cook on the line. Well, that usually means that you are doing the work of like 3 people. You are completely justified in taking the get out option. You tried to ask for help calmly, and you begged for more staff members to help you. The owner created a structure where the manager was the only filter of information, which enabled this whole mess." And the next one is from r/maliciouscompliance and is titled "Old School Construction Architect with an Ego." So this one dates back to 1998. I had been working construction for a year as a drywall finisher spreading mud when I was offered a job on a big crew. The only reason they wanted me was to be a translator between English and French. I was good but not fast or great at this point, but hey, $18 an hour was good money. And damn guys, $18 an hour in 1998, that is insane. Anyway, we were working on a 5-story building. It was the first time I really had seen just the bones of a building. For those unfamiliar with this area of construction, I'm gonna give a little background on how it worked on sites this big. Each company had their own construction trailer, no one really had email, so each trailer had a couple of phone lines and a secretary, and this building was for a real estate company. It was to be their headquarters. It was designed by an architect in New York as a favor to the owner of the building, so here's where the problem goes. My boss, L, had all the framing, hanging the drywall, finished the seams and acoustic ceiling tiles with metal grid. L goes to the general contractor with an issue on third floor training room, and L said, "We got a height problem with third floor ceiling." General contractor, "What's wrong now?" L, "He's got it at 4 feet off the floor." General contractor, "Wait, what?" "Yeah, both ceiling reflected plan and elevation show 4 feet off the finished floor. If I scale it, it would be 12 foot. General contractor, "Yeah, that don't sound right. Go ahead and send a request for information." Back then, requests for information were different than today. Usually it meant someone was gonna have to pay. So L faxes over the request for information and marks it as urgent. When request for information comes back, they were sent to both the general contractor and the subcontractor. So here I am, sitting with L and the general contractor just chatting around, and both secretary come out to the side almost running with high heels through the debris, and both with poop-eating grins on their face. I'm thinking, oh damn, this should be good. L and contractor, "Slow down ladies, where's the fire?" General contractor secretary, "You got an urgent fax." L secretary, "We got the request for information back." Looking at the other secretary giggling, they look at their paper, then look at me, and general contractor reads it out loud. "Request for information, XXX from office of A-Hole Architect Inc. Urgent request information of discrepancy on ceiling height from L&. office about training room XXXXX. Answer, how hard is it for you construction workers to understand never scale anything? I don't make mistakes. Refer to page A804 for detailed height instructions. Q. Malicious compliance. General contractor. Well, L, what does A804 say about ceiling heights? L. 4 foot but. General contractor. Hey Frenchie, do you think you can translate that to the ceiling guys? Tell them it's a hot priority. I want it done by Sunday. So L said, you heard him, tell him to drop what he's doing and go to it. Me, 10 to 4. I go to the guy and they greet me with a tabernacle French-Canadian cuss word of, "Are you nuts, kid?" I tell them what had transpired and told them that L said to make it 4 foot. They grumbled, saying that they would charge to do it again. Now, this training room was not your typical space. It was like 300 feet long by 40 feet wide that could be separated to make multiple training rooms or one giant one with folding partition. Monday comes, general contractor instructs the electrician to install all the lights as per the prints. Yes, even his prints had 4 foot notation. Typically we would wait for electrical inspection, but we didn't. By Wednesday, the crew is putting tiles in. Saturday comes and there is an owner meeting where he walks the job site with general contractor and talks about the progress. Everything is going good until he gets to the 3rd floor training room door and sees a bar 4 foot from the ground and all the wires for the ceiling is in plain sight. Owner, what in the hell is this? Don't you know how to read blueprints? General contractor, yes sir, we do and we did. We also sent an RFI. Shows him the facts. Owner now grins. Yeah, he definitely has an ego from hell. Do you have everything documented, pictures and all? General contractor, you know it. Owner, okay smartass, now do it at 12 feet, 4 feet from the deck. You're making 20% on this screw up, aren't you? General contractor, 20% to the build invoice. We're going to have a demo crew come in and then all new material plus the crew already said it's gonna be 50% upcharge since we are preventing them from going to the next site. Yeah, just be happy it's not coming out of your pocket because the architect gave wrong information and it was built as per his guidelines. He had to fork out a few thousands out of his pocket to us dumb construction workers to fix his mistake. Learned 2 valuable lessons that day. The first one, always do as you are told no matter if it makes sense, except when it endangers a life. And number 2, document everything, no matter how trivial, it will cover your ass. And the next one is a malicious compliance story which is titled, "We need an excuse to fire him. Check his internet usage." So this is more of a failed attempt of HR being malicious with a sacking approach. This happened in the UK, it's not like in the US. You cannot just fire someone because you feel like it and with no warning. About 15 years ago, in an old office of mine, there was a guy who was pretty useless. However, he was union and he knew all the workarounds. For example, you're not good at your job. Yeah, well, you need to give me a proper training. And so on. Anyway, he was actually useless and lazy, so management and HR went through all the different ways to terminate his contract, but it took ages. Eventually, a new policy was introduced about abusing workplace internet usage for non-work related stuff, and it was a sackable offense. Usage was unlimited at the time, but they were able to track time spent on non-work sites. It was known that this guy used the internet for personal stuff, so HR said to be fair and ensure that he cannot counter the argument that 10 other random people in the department need to be checked over the same time period, so over the space of about a month, internet was monitored. From him, plus the 10 randoms, although he used the internet a lot, he was by far the lowest user out of everyone they checked. Needless to say, HR soon backed down on that approach. Otherwise, they would have to sack the entire department. I think he finally got sacked for operating at his own business using work resources, but it took a long time. And yeah guys, I hope you have an awesome day and I will see you again tomorrow.